We live in the age of moral outrage. Swipe through any feed and you'll find it. Rage, apology, cancellation, condemnation. But beneath the hashtags and headlines lies a deeper question. Where does morality come from? Are we tapping into eternal truths when we say something is wrong? Or are we acting out ancient grievances disguised as virtue? Friedrich Nietzsche thought the latter. In 1887, he wrote On the Genealogy of Morals, a work not about morality's content, but its origin story. He invites us into a psychological archaeology, not to build up, but to dig down, past ethics, past religion, to the human instincts buried beneath. We are unknown to ourselves, we men of knowledge. We have never searched for ourselves. Nietzsche. Preface to Genealogy. Today, we search. Through cancel culture, identity politics, guilt, forgiveness, and the weaponization of shame. We follow Nietzsche down this dangerous path to ask, are we moral or merely obedient? Are we kind or are we caged? Let us begin. What is good? Nietzsche doesn't blink. Everything that heightens the feeling of power in man. Genealogy, first essay. Wait, power? Not kindness? Not fairness? Nietzsche is not joking. He means that goodness, before it was tamed, meant greatness. To be good was to be strong, assertive, capable, self-creating. What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that resistance is overcome. The Antichrist. This wasn't selfishness. It was vitality, a will to affirm life, to shape the world rather than shrink from it. In contrast, Nietzsche defines bad as weakness. Not sin, not wickedness, simply lack of power. The noble type of man experiences itself as value-creating. It does not need approval. It is value itself. Here lies Nietzsche's dangerous idea. Morality wasn't born from truth, but from the psychology of those in charge. We begin not with commandments, but with power and its expression. Nietzsche says morality isn't singular. It's split, long ago. On one side, master morality. On the other, slave morality. In master morality, good means noble, strong, self-sufficient. Pride, ambition, victory, these are celebrated. The aristocratic warrior, the Homeric hero, the Roman noble. Good and bad in this world are statements of self-affirmation. The powerful say, we are good because we are strong, brave, joyful. And the weak? They are merely bad, pitied, or ignored. Slave morality reverses this. The weak, unable to retaliate physically, retaliate morally. They call the master's strength evil. They call their own humility, obedience, and weakness good. Slave morality begins in resentment. It says no to everything that is outside, that is different, that is not itself. This is the slave revolt in morals. From this comes the concept of evil as moralized strength. Compare. Master morality equals good versus bad. Slave morality equals good versus evil. And this shift was revolutionary. As Kierkegaard wrote, the tyrant dies, and his rule ends. The martyr dies, and his rule begins. Christianity became the triumph of slave morality, a morality of suffering, of meekness, of guilt. Nietzsche wasn't praising masters. He was diagnosing how morality changed from life-affirming to life-denying.
There is no morality without psychology. Nietzsche introduces a crucial term, ressentiment, not mere resentment, but spiritual vengeance disguised as virtue. The slave cannot strike the master, so he calls the master evil, sinful, damned. He moralizes his powerlessness. He says, "My suffering proves I am good." In order to arise, slave morality always needs an external stimulus. Its action is fundamentally reaction. Nietzsche. This morality says no to life, no to pleasure, no to pride, no to strength. In this way, virtue becomes a mask for impotence. Those who cannot create must criticize. Camus. Ressentiment explains much of our world today. Why public shame feels righteous, why we glorify weakness, why we suspect excellence as arrogance. As Max Scheler warned, ressentiment is a self-poisoning of the mind, an inability to let go of past injuries. It is easier to moralize power than to develop it, easier to condemn than to transcend. The birds of prey eat the lambs. This is the natural order. But the lambs, tired of blood, invent a fable. The birds are evil, we are good. They spread the story, they multiply, and eventually the birds believe it too. This, says Nietzsche, is how slave morality triumphed. The weak have taken the name of the good and applied it to themselves. Genealogy. This wasn't democracy, it was psychological revolution. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Gospel of Matthew. Nietzsche sees this not as divine revelation, but morality revenge. A world that once honored warriors and poets now honors victims and martyrs. Not creation, but correction. Not assent, but apology. He saw modern man as a domesticated animal, tamed, pale and comfortable, but deeply bored and bitter. Genealogy, the third essay. We traded vitality for morality, and something was lost.
Imagine a world without morality, a world where to harm meant to owe, not to sin. Nietzsche claims that in early societies, guilt was not a moral concept, it was an economic one. You hurt someone, you're in their debt. You repay not with shame, but with pain or goods. Justice was transactional, a ledger of injury and repayment. The feeling of guilt originally had nothing to do with a bad conscience. It arose out of the material relationship between creditor and debtor. Nietzsche, Genealogy, second essay. But something changed. As societies grew more complex, debts became invisible, and so too did punishment. Pain, once external, became internal. Religions and legal systems moved the courtroom into the soul. What was once restitution became repentance. Where there is no visible repayment, the punishment becomes spiritualized. Nietzsche. We began to judge not the act, but the person, and slowly guilt took root in the psyche. This was the invention of the sinner. The psychological shift from "I broke a rule" to "I am broken." As Dostoevsky observed in Crime and Punishment, the real punishment is in the conscience. Nothing is more painful. Nietzsche warns, we did not grow moral, we grew tamed by the chains of unseen creditors. What happens when a wild animal is put in a cage? Nietzsche applies this metaphor to man. Our ancestors were predators, instinctive, unashamed. They lived outwardly, explosively, physically. But then came the walls, cities, laws, customs, taboos, priests. Those instincts didn't vanish, they turned inward. All instincts that do not discharge themselves outwardly turn inward. This is what I call the internalization of man. Genealogy, second essay. The result, the bad conscience, a sickness of the soul, an instinct turned against itself. Man, suffering from himself, the animal man turned inward, Nietzsche. We became creatures of shame, of self-doubt, of psychological violence. This guilt wasn't healing, it was corrosion. Carl Jung later echoed this. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Nietzsche would say, our guilt is illegitimate. It is the price we pay for being domesticated. We hate ourselves because we can no longer act. And into that self-hatred steps a savior. Enter the ascetic priest. He is not a tyrant, he is not a warrior. He is instead a master of the soul. The priest is the ideal shepherd of a sick herd. Nietzsche, third essay. He tells the suffering, you suffer because you are guilty, but there is hope. Deny yourself, obey, repent, and the people feel relief. At last their pain has meaning. This is the perversion of suffering, from misfortune to virtue. He interprets pain as punishment. In this, he gives it purpose. Nietzsche. In Christianity, Buddhism, Stoicism, even secular ideologies, the ascetic figure appears. He offers salvation through abstinence, discipline, guilt, and we accept it. Man would rather will nothingness than not will at all. Genealogy. Sigmund Freud would later call this the superego, the voice in our heads that judges and punishes. But Nietzsche saw it not as natural, but as manufactured, a product of power. Through guilt, the priest rules silently. Whoever fights monsters should see that he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. Beyond good and evil. In our self-denial, we risk becoming monsters of moralism.
We often think of power as force, military, wealth, violence. But Nietzsche asks us to look again. Power doesn't always come with a sword. Sometimes it comes with a whisper. You are wrong. You are guilty. You must be forgiven. This is the power of guilt. Morality is the best tool of the weak to bind the strong. Nietzsche. Whoever defines sin controls virtue. Whoever controls guilt controls behavior. The priest, the pundit, the influencer, all can become moral tyrants. He who controls the narrative controls the conscience. Foucault. Guilt is not passive. It's a currency, a means of manipulation. In modern society, we guilt others not to elevate them, but to humble, silence, and control. As Marx would say, the ruling ideas of each age have ever been the ideas of its ruling class, the German ideology. But now the ruling class may not be financial, it may be moral. Nietzsche foresaw this, a future where outrage becomes a social economy.
Nietzsche was not writing history. He was reading us. He saw that slave morality had won. In our churches, schools, and media, we value meekness over courage, safety over risk, niceness over truth. Pity stands opposed to the tonic emotions which heighten our vitality. It has a depressive effect, the Antichrist. This isn't compassion, it's domestication. We fear judgment more than failure. We seek comfort, not greatness. Nietzsche called this future man the last man, a creature without ambition, without depth, without danger. The last man blinks, thus spoke Zarathustra. And we blink endlessly. Endless content, endless outrage, endless guilt. What have we sacrificed for this comfort? Albert Camus, who admired Nietzsche, said, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free
that your very existence is an act of rebellion. But slave morality hates rebellion. It calls it ego, arrogance, toxicity. Nietzsche dares us to rebel anyway, not to dominate, but to become. To affirm life, not deny it. To rise, not kneel. And above all, to create our own values. What drives human beings? Nietzsche's answer is not pleasure, not even survival. This world is the will to power and nothing besides. The will to power is not a desire to dominate others, at least not always. It is the instinct to expand, to express, to affirm oneself in the world, to transform chaos into form, suffering into meaning, silence into song. Where I found living things, there I found will to power. Thus spoke Zarathustra. All life, Nietzsche says, is an effort to assert form upon reality. Even the weak exert their will, not through strength, but through guilt, shame, and law. Power is not just brute force. It is creative, moral, aesthetic, spiritual. The noble soul has reverence for itself, beyond good and evil. Contrast this with Freud's libido, or Schopenhauer's will to life. Nietzsche's will to power goes deeper. It explains art, ambition, philosophy, even self-sacrifice. When morality denies this force, calling it sinful, egoistic, dangerous, it denies life itself. This is why Nietzsche despised life-denying moralities. Christianity is a metaphysics of the hangman, the Antichrist. He challenges us to stop pretending we are humble, passive beings, and to recognize the creative, striving energy at the core of our souls. Nietzsche never tells us to be evil. He tells us to go beyond good and evil. Not to live without values, but to become value creators, not just value obeyers. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Twilight of the Idols. Morality as we know it is inherited. It is programmed, unquestioned. But Nietzsche's Overman dares to ask, are these values mine or merely convenient lies? This is not chaos, it is courage. Morality is the herd instinct in the individual, beyond good and evil. To go beyond morality is to take responsibility for your own soul, to live according to your strengths, not others' fears. Albert Camus, a philosophical descendant of Nietzsche, writes, "A man without ethics is a wild beast loosed upon this world." Yet Nietzsche would say, "A man without his own ethics is a tamed beast in someone else's zoo." What does it mean to live freely? Not to harm others, but to stand without borrowed commandments. As Soren Kierkegaard said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." Beyond good and evil is not amorality, it is authenticity.
Nietzsche could not have foreseen Twitter, but he would have recognized the dynamic, the righteous crowds, the public shaming, the glorification of victimhood, the moral theater. We are living in a new moral economy. Every sufferer looks for someone to blame, Nietzsche. Today we see moral worth measured by suffering, by who has been harmed, excluded, offended. While real injustice exists, Nietzsche warns against weaponizing weakness. Ressentiment wears new faces. The man of ressentiment is not upright. He is neither honest nor naive. Genealogy. Identity can be empowering, but it can also be used to silence, to punish, to moralize without wisdom. Foucault, drawing on Nietzsche, observed, "Power is everywhere. It comes from everywhere. Discipline and punish." In identity politics, who has the moral authority? The speaker or the sufferer? The critic or the accused? Are we seeking justice or control? The more abstract the truth you want to teach, the more you must seduce the senses, Nietzsche. The new morality seduces through narratives of oppression, but who benefits and who dares to dissent? Nietzsche invites us to interrogate why we are offended and whether our moral reaction is a form of personal powerlessness. Nietzsche's priests wore robes. Today's wear microphones and usernames, but their function is the same. They name sins. They grant forgiveness. They demand penance. Wherever the religious neurosis has appeared, it is tied to a system of priestly mediation, the Antichrist. Whether on platforms, pulpits, or protest lines, modern moralism thrives on rituals of guilt. You say something problematic. You are exposed. You are asked to apologize. You confess. You are absolved or excommunicated. It is digital purification, not unlike medieval confession. As René Girard observed, the crowd needs a scapegoat, someone to absorb their guilt. Cancel culture is not about justice, it's about catharsis. The priest no longer controls salvation, but reputation. Nietzsche saw this coming. Morality is the herd's weapon to control the exceptional, genealogy. He asks us to resist the priests, not by cruelty, but by refusing to kneel. There is a new market in town, the morality market. Virtue is now currency. Pity is capital. Confession is clout. One man gains by his virtues, another by his vices. La Rochelle Foucault. We signal virtue not to be good, but to be seen as good. We apologize not from remorse, but to protect our brand. This is not ethics, it is performative morality. Nietzsche would call it a theater of ressentiment. Man prefers to will nothingness than not will at all. Genealogy. Better to be guilty and active than invisible and ignored. We have created a world where guilt is profitable, but authenticity is punished. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. The dawn. What do we lose when we trade truth for tribalism? When we perform outrage instead of pursue understanding? Nietzsche's answer, we lose ourselves, because to live under borrowed guilt is to never stand tall.
Nietzsche is the philosopher of fire. Epicurus is the philosopher of stillness. Centuries before the Christian moral order, Epicurus preached not guilt, not fear, but ataraxia, a state of untroubled mind, free from anxiety. If you wish to be rich, do not add to your money, but subtract from your desires, Epicurus. He believed fear, especially fear of divine punishment, was the root of human misery. Contrast that with Nietzsche, who believed guilt had replaced fear as the internal prison. But both philosophers wanted liberation, not escape into fantasy, but return to what is natural in the human being. Nietzsche admired the ancient world's honesty, where strength was not yet called sin and pleasure was not guilt's shadow. Epicurus, the soul of light who opposed the darkened conscience of his age, Nietzsche, Twilight of the Idols. But he also criticized the softening of values. Where Epicurus sought peace, Nietzsche sought overcoming. Still, both converge on one point. Morality should serve life, not enslave it. The cry of the soul is not for more commandments, but for more courage. Seneca. Nietzsche and Epicurus in this sense are kindred, opponents of priestly power, defenders of the flourishing human being, one with a whisper, the other with a roar. Sigmund Freud followed Nietzsche's footsteps into the psyche. He gave structure to what Nietzsche intuited. Freud's superego is the internalized authority figure, the voice that punishes us for our thoughts, not just our actions. The superego torments the ego with feelings of guilt and inferiority. Freud, Civilization and Its Discontents. This guilt, Freud says, is the price of civilization. The more advanced the society, the more repression we endure. The ID wants, the ego negotiates, and the superego punishes. Nietzsche wrote, "The bad conscience is an illness, but it is also a pregnancy." Genealogy, second essay. The superego is this very illness. But while Freud aimed to treat it through psychoanalysis, Nietzsche aimed to transcend it through spiritual strength. Carl Jung took it further, noted, "Guilt is perhaps the most painful companion of death." Jung. Modern man, with his therapy and pills and confessions, still hasn't escaped the voice of the priest. He has only renamed it. Nietzsche's genius was to see that morality was not medicine, it was often the disease. Michel Foucault, philosopher of systems, took Nietzsche's insight and ran with it into modernity. Nietzsche saw morality as the disguised will to power. Foucault saw all norms, sexual, academic, legal, as products of power. Power is not something that is acquired, seized, or shared. It is exercised from innumerable points. Foucault, History of Sexuality. There is no single priest, no single tyrant, only networks of influence, schools, hospitals, prisons, apps. Morality doesn't descend from heaven. It is manufactured to produce docile bodies and predictable behavior. We are not only dominated, but we are made into subjects. Foucault. Guilt is not just personal, it is engineered, enforced by algorithms, feedback loops, HR departments. Nietzsche feared the herd. Foucault feared the grid. Where there is power, there is resistance. Foucault. But what is resistance in an age where even rebellion is monetized? Nietzsche's solution: become unpredictable, creative, alive, a value creator. Foucault's solution: know the system, then refuse it. Freedom is the possibility of departure.
All of Nietzsche's philosophy leads to one figure, the Übermensch, the Overman, not a tyrant, not a superhuman, but a spiritually sovereign being, one who creates their own values. Man is something that shall be overcome, said Zarathustra. The Overman is beyond guilt, not because he is evil, but because he has integrated his instincts. I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things, Nietzsche said. He doesn't seek permission to live. He says yes to life, its pain, its chaos, its joy. Carl Jung mirrored this when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The Overman is not about conquering others. He conquers himself, his past, his fear, his guilt. He looks back and says, "Thus I willed it." Amor fati, the love of fate. He transforms suffering into strength, guilt into greatness, chaos into character. As Nietzsche put it, "He who has built his house upon the will to power has built it upon the sea, but it floats." Now we return to our original question. What is good? Not what we were told, not what makes us safe, but what makes us strong in spirit, in mind, in love. Guilt is not always bad. It can awaken, but when institutionalized, it stagnates the soul. As Simone Weil wrote, "Imaginary evil is romantic and varied. Real evil is gloomy, monotonous, barren." Real guilt is not thrilling. It's quiet, paralyzing. Nietzsche asks you to interrogate your guilt. Who gave it to you? Does it lift you up or crush you? Is it a ladder or a leash? He wants your freedom, not shallow choice, but the freedom to live according to your inner nobility. I teach you the Overman. Man is a rope stretched between beast and Overman, a dangerous crossing. The future does not belong to the outraged, or the guiltless, or the obedient. It belongs to the value creators, the courageous souls who stare into the abyss and build a home there. So ask yourself, are you living your own morality or someone else's rules? Are you free? And if not, when will you begin?